Today, I'm talking to Polly Phillips about her latest book, a psychological thriller called The Reunion. Now, I'm really excited to talk to Polly about her writing process. She is originally from the UK, but currently lives in Perth. And her debut novel, My Best Friend's Murder, was released to great success. And now this is her second book, The Reunion. Thank you so much for joining us today, Polly Phillips. Oh my God, The Reunion. So much to talk about. Congratulations on this book. For listeners who haven't got a copy yet, tell us what it's about.
It is the story of a woman who is given the chance to go back to a university reunion. And when she was at university, she started off in the it crowd and sort of living her best life with a team of really amazing, or so she thought, friends around her and a hot, gorgeous, successful boyfriend. And something happened to her one night at university, which sent her life spiraling in a direction she didn't want it to go. And she seizes the opportunity to go to the reunion and go back and get payback for the people that she blames for her life going wrong.
Now, this is, how did you come up with this idea? Did you go to a reunion? Where did this come from?
I don't know if I'd be allowed to go to reunion now. I have actually been to two. I went to Cambridge, which is where the book is set. Yes. So I had lots of rich material to draw on from that experience. But I just liked the idea of, I suppose, righting wrongs. And gosh, where did the idea come from? I think just the idea came from toxic friendships, actually, which is something I really like to look at. And the idea that you wake up one day and realize that a lot of time's gone by and you're nowhere near where you thought you'd be. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, even if they don't have a sort of tragedy to overcome.
So before we talk more about the book, let's go a little bit into your background. You went to Cambridge. What did you read at Cambridge? And then what subsequent career did you go into before you started writing novels?
So I read history at Cambridge, and I always wanted to be a writer or a journalist. And so that's what I did. As soon as I did a series of terrible work placements and lots of work experience for free, which is generally the way that you get into that industry. And my first job out of university was writing for soap operas, writing about soap operas in a soap opera magazine. So that's why it's kind of particularly exciting to have moved to Australia, the home of Neighbours and Home and Away. I was sort of chuffed when that opportunity came up. And then I worked for some national newspapers, but all the while hankering after writing this novel, but just not sitting down and doing it for a long time.
So what then was the trigger? Because this is your second novel. What was the trigger that made you start writing your first novel, My Best Friend's Murder?
So I started writing a novel, not actually My Best Friend's Murder, when my husband got made redundant. And the only job that he could get, it was, my husband's in oil and gas, and there was a big oil crash. The only job he could get was in Algeria. So I went back to London with our daughter, obviously was not that keen to join him in Algeria, and it wasn't an option, just because he was working on a base that wasn't particularly safe. And I had a lot of time on my own in the evenings. My daughter was very small. None of my friends in London had kids. It was quite a lonely experience. And I thought, if I don't take something positive out of it, it's a waste. And I've been talking about writing a book for about 10 years and not done anything with it. So if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. So that's when I started writing, full stop. And I started writing another book, which didn't go anywhere. I sent it out a few times. Nobody was sort of particularly interested in the storyline. And then I saw on social media something about a friend that I had lost contact with. It had been a bit of a toxic relationship, and the spark fired up, and I thought that I would like to write about it.
Wow. Okay. So you're at home with your daughter, not much going on. You have this idea. Is that where you just started writing, or did you have an idea of where the book was going to go? Are you, someone who has to think about it for a long time, or did you just start with a scene and go for it?
I actually just started with a prologue, and just the words came. They came flowing out, and then actually they've changed quite a lot since I sort of started that rough first draft, which obviously is often the way. but I just really wanted to capture that friendship and that sense of rivalry and toxicity, and on the surface everything seems so sort of lovely and idyllic, but underneath there's a sort of beating heart of resentment. So the first bit didn't change that much, but the story itself got a lot more dramatic.
Brilliant. So tell us about this book and the gestation period for this book then. Give us a little bit of a timeline as to when you got the idea, what period, like how many months or however long it took to write the first draft, and then what happened after that?
So I had the idea towards the end of finishing off my first book. So then I don't know if you've had that sort of sense that you're kind of cheating on your established book, which is like your long-term relationship, a bit like a marriage. And this shiny new idea comes along with no problems, and it seems so pure and exciting. So I was itching to get started on it, and finally finished off all the edits and the proofreading for the first book. Got cracking on the second book straight away. Again, I love writing the prologue. I always sort of find that can be a bit of a mission statement for the book. So that came quite easily without too much planning, just with that kind of central idea. So the prologue, without giving too much away, starts with one of the central characters being strangled. And is she going to get out alive? And who's got the motivation to do that? So
and it gets you in straight away. Oh my God, it absolutely does.
Oh, thank you. So that bit came very easily without much planning, but then I did realize I had another 80,000 words to go, and I'm not confident enough to write without a plan. I do need to have these kind of structural points of knowing where I'm going, so that I don't waffle. So I came up with quite a loose plan of the kind of high points and the low points of what was going to happen. That probably took about a month, and that was January. No, it wasn't January, sorry, it was February 2020. So the world was in lockdown. Although being in Perth, where I'm based, we escaped pretty lightly at that point.
Lockdown there.
Exactly. And then it probably takes me about 6 months, maybe a little bit less, to write a first draft. It's quite a dirty first draft. It will be a bit ragged, but will kind of follow those general plot points. And then I give myself a month away from it to try and be a bit more objective when I come back to it, because you sort of finish on that high and it's done, and you type the end and you think, oh, it's brilliant, da, 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 da. And then you reread it and you think, oh my God, this is just terrible. So I need that month to kind of get myself in gear, reset, reframe, and then I go back in and kind of attack the edits quite hard. And I work around the school holidays, so I try and make sure that those times when I'm taking a break from the book coincide with when I need to be on duty to be sort of full-time parenting. And then I sent it to my agent, and she had a bunch of changes, and then once those changes have been made, it went to my editor. So it's kind of a year-long process, really.
Yes. So let's go back to the month where you're thinking about it, and you're actually thinking about your plot points, your high points, your low points. You start off with the prologue, which absolutely not only gets the reader in, I can see how, like, you read it, you go, and you know, I'm going to finish this book, and I'm going to finish this book quickly, because I won't be able to help myself. So in that month, though, you say that you are a planner. What do you actually do in terms of your thinking? Is this just while you're going about your day and you're thinking about your characters? How do you develop the characters? How do you that, like a whole plot point? I mean, a whole story in present day and in the past, because, you know, that's what we're looking at, is quite complicated. How did you think of all of these turning points and plot points?
Yeah, I think it is as you sort of go about your day. I mean, I do sort of sit there and stare at my desk for hours and spend too long on Instagram and all that sort of stuff. I suppose the nice thing about this book was because it was funneling such a lot of my own university experience and sort of things I saw there and those memories, I could tell myself as I was messing around on Facebook and Instagram that I was sort of technically researching, um, going down these rabbit holes and seeing what people I'd been to university with had ended up doing. But then I think sort of odd sentences and that sort of stuff come to you. I do a lot of running and also walk the dog a lot. So it's those kind of moments of being on my own with nothing but company but my thoughts that sort of helps crystallize things. But I also think that things occur to you, even though I had my plan and I tried to be faithful to it, and it sort of gives me that security and sort of comfort that I know where I'm going. Things will change massively, and lots of things change during this book. And I sort of had a couple of those moments of sort of huge revelations. Of course, this doesn't happen, that happens. And of course, this character, which are really exciting when they happen. And they are quite natural and you desperately want them to happen, but you can't manufacture them. So they surprise me each time.
So when you're not having revelations and you're just kind of thinking about, well, what's going to happen next? Is it more a case of, let's just see where it goes in my head? Or is it, I need to get there, and how am I going to get there? You see what I mean?
Yes, I do. It's a great question. I think it is a mixture, sort of classic politician answer. It's a mixture of the two. But I'd be lying if I didn't say there is an element of crumbs. This needs to happen. How can I, particularly when you're working with a dual timeline. And I was trying to match up because it flips from now and then back and forth sort of every other chapter. I had to be really careful to make sure that I was sort of following the process to make sure that they married up.
So then what happens? Like, does it stay in your head, or do you write down, and if you write down the plot points as they come to you? And in what form? Is it just a little script? Is it just this happens, or do you write a mini scene? And what do you write it in, like Word or Scrivener or a notebook, a physical notebook? What?
Every format. I have. I'm not very good with tech, so Scrivener is well beyond me. So I don't even really know how to use notes on my phone. So I send myself emails. Like I have a draft email that I will suddenly write, this happens, or a sentence or a character or something like that. So that's my kind of working notebook. Then I'm a stationery addict, so I love going to good old office works and picking up new notebooks. Like I have one here, so this is for the next book. So it's really dirty because my daughter's been using it to color on. And generally Word though. But the plan, right. Sorry, you were asking about the plan. So the plan I will write out, I will draw it on a piece of A4 printer paper. So it has to kind of have this big peak, sort of look like a children's, almost kind of a terrible picture of a mountain, because you're sort of trying to go up to that climactic. And sometimes
so you're drawing out the 3-act structure kind of thing.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Right, but you're just sort of like writing the plot points on where they are.
Yes,
on that 3-act structure, on that
exactly.
arc.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And so, all right. So you've got your outline, which may change when you then write it.
Yeah.
You've got your outline and you go, okay, I'm ready to write. So can you talk us through, when you're writing, a typical writing day? Maybe walk us through if you have any particular writing routines or rituals or superstitions or things that you just have to do on a typical day, and what you typically achieve or aim to achieve in that day.
So I'm definitely a morning person. I like to write in the mornings. We have quite a busy household, so me, my husband, the dog, the daughter coming and going. So I don't get up early and write, but once my daughter is safely at school, I will have got everything else out of the way in that kind of hour of sort of making breakfast and making sure the dog's sorted and all that sort of stuff. Then when I get back from that drop off, I'm ready to write. The very first thing I do, my ritual, is I always make myself a hot chocolate. I'm absolutely obsessed by hot chocolate and sugar. My entire writing process is fueled by sugar. So I make myself my hot chocolate, and then I will sit down and start. As I say, I probably do spend a bit too much time messing around on Instagram and Facebook. But once I get into the scene, I will kind of keep my head down. And I'm probably aiming to get if I haven't got 1,000 words done in a writing day, because obviously the day changes depending on where you are in the process, if you're editing, drafting, writing, that sort of thing. But when I'm writing those first or second drafts, I want to get 1,000 words down. I will feel probably like I've mucked around a bit too much if I haven't. And I generally tend to work in chapters. So I will sort of sit down and it will be, you know, I'm trying to do chapter 4 today, for example. So I will start on chapter 4 and not stop working until it's finished.
And about how long does that take? Does it take you until school pickup time, or do you finish earlier?
I think it depends. And I don't know about you, but I find the beginning so exciting and so much fun to write. And those, you know, you can sort of whiz off 1,500 words maybe in an hour if you're sort of really racing to get that kind of exciting bit down. And the end is the same.
Yes.
You are zooming, you're so excited, particularly the kind of books that I write hopefully are sort of stuffed full of twists and turns. So you've kind of got hopefully a nice big reveal that you've set up perfectly, ideally, at the end. So that is a quick writing process as well. That saggy middle can take longer. So long. But so I would sort of say between kind of, I don't know, two to sort of 4 or 5 hours. And then if I do finish early and I'm still feeling inspired, I will start drafting the next chapter, but sort of in bullet points, you know, this is going to happen and that sort of stuff. But I like to close down the laptop knowing that I've finished a section. I'm not very good at leaving things halfway through, which I know some people really like to do because it sort of means that they can pick up straight away the next day, but it sort of stays with me and agitates me if I haven't reached a conclusion.
So how close does the story, in terms of when you're writing and the story rolls out, how close is it to the outline? Like, is the outline quite tight, or do you deviate quite a bit from what you wrote in that month of thinking?
I think I do deviate quite a bit, because I think that's when the story takes on the life of its own. That's when you're breathing into it and your characters maybe aren't doing exactly, it no longer makes sense for them to do what you've sort of had them theoretically doing. They've developed a bit of a life of their own sometimes. I remember with the reunion, when I finished it, I suddenly had this huge moment of panic when I went back and read the synopsis that I'd sent to the editor who bought it, thinking, oh my God, it's not what I said. What if they don't want it? And I actually even asked, when I sent it to my agent, I did sort of say, I am a bit worried because we had talked about this, that, and the next thing, and it has changed quite a lot. And I was really petrified to read the response, but luckily the editor did like it.
Let's talk about your agent. How did you get your agent? Because a lot of listeners are very keen on that kind of story.
So I had, as I said, been writing this first book that was going to be this historical fiction that didn't go anywhere. So I'd made a few loose investigations into getting an agent at that point, and I was based in Dubai then. But when I started my new project, My Best Friend's Murder, I submitted it into a competition in Dubai. And I think competitions are really a very helpful, good way to go, because even if you don't place or win, ideally you'll still get some feedback. And I think it also teaches you about writing to a deadline and teaches you about word count and that sort of stuff, and really kind of tightening up and making your submission as strong as it possibly can be, which is obviously what you're trying to do when you're submitting to an agent anyway. So My Best Friend's Murder miraculously won the competition that I had entered it into. It wasn't quite an overnight success. I had entered that competition 2 years previously and got nowhere. But My Best Friend's Murder won it.
The persistence pays off.
Exactly. And part of the prize was to sit down with one of the judges who was a literary agent. And he gave me some really invaluable feedback. That's actually how the book became My Best Friend's Murder, because he said, you've got to have a murder in it. Because at that point, it was just an examination of a toxic friendship. There was no bloodshed. So I met him and I was very keen for him to be my agent. And he did offer me a lot of guidance, but he was quite busy and he was going away. So I had desperately dashed off the first draft to send to him to hope that he would sign me. And as I said, I worked around the school holidays, so I was desperate to send it off and then sort of get on with that side of my life. And he said, oh, actually I'm going to be away for a couple of months, so don't rush, maybe send it in September, don't worry about July. And my sort of fragile writing ego felt a little bit rejected, and I thought, actually I won't put all my eggs in one basket. I'd started reading some amazing online blogs and listening to sort of podcasts that talked about how a writer should try and think of their agent not as a person doing them a favor, as somebody who they will have an equal relationship with. Whereas as an aspiring writer, I had that kind of desperate sense of please pick me, please. You know, this sort of had all these agents on a huge pedestal. And then I sort of suddenly had this slight shift in mindset when I thought, actually, no, I've got to try and represent my work fairly. And these people aren't, well, if what you've got is, if they want to publish it or help you get it published, they're not actually doing you a favor. Don't sort of think of them as the sort of the cool boy in school that you're sort of plucking up the guts to ask out. You know, this is an equal thing. So I sent it to 5 agents, not just him, and 4 of them asked to see a full manuscript, because obviously you only send those first 3 chapters. And then of that 4, 3 wanted to sign me, which was Fantastic. An amazing feeling. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that's brilliant. So let's go back to the first project was a historical novel.
Yes.
So that's very different.
Yes.
So do you think you want to go back to that genre? Or have you found your groove with this?
I love writing psychological thrillers. So I think that's where my heart lies. I love the fact that they give you that automatic structure, because there's a sort of whodunit element to it. So you kind of know how the story has to end, which is very helpful. But because the historical fiction was going to be based on my grandmother's life, which I think a lot of people are drawn to, the sort of amazing lives that our relatives in the war had. So she was a spy based in Sri Lanka, and she met my grandfather there. He was also a spy, and they had a very tumultuous relationship, and sort of on the backdrop, set against the backdrop of war in Sri Lanka. So I still feel like there's something there.
Oh my God, yes.
So I don't know. Maybe when I'm resting between books, I might actually go back and do that. It's still tugging on heartstrings.
This is now out. Does that mean you're already writing? The reunion is now out. So does that mean you're already writing the third one?
Yes. Yeah. I'm actually writing, sort of nearing the end of book 3, because, as you know, there's often quite a lag between when the book is finished. Once the sort of publishing process, you know, that machine has to take over. It can often be sort of up to a year before the book comes out. So I'm actually now, I've just started a bit like how I told you at the beginning of the process. I've started cheating on book 3 with book 4.
Oh, wow. You're already up to book 4.
Well, book 4, I'm flirting with book 4.
Yes. You're doing that thinking thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And is the process the same for each of them, in that you do, say, a month of thinking where you effectively create an outline and work out what happens and then you write?
No, it's wildly different, actually.
Oh.
I think just the difference between writing to a deadline and not, in terms of, with my first book, I didn't have a deal when I was writing it. Obviously, it was that kind of debut experience. So I was really able to linger over it and sort of pick it up and put it down. Whereas the reunion had a much tighter deadline because I was writing under contract. So it was in some ways a much more focused process, but alongside, the flip side of that focus can be the pressure. And then now book 3, just because I'm sort of in contract negotiations, book 3 had that same sort of looser feel to the writing process, a bit longer, a bit more sort of fiddling, I suppose. I think the reunion is probably the cleanest book I've written. It came probably the most smoothly.
In terms of the characterizations and the development of the key players, How did you, I don't know, I get the sense that these are kind of people that you knew, or composites of people that you knew at Cambridge. So in a sense, it wasn't that hard to, yeah.
It was more actually having to sort of take out some of their defining characteristics rather than create them. But as you say, you know, again, legal answer, no, but it was very much a composite, as you say. And I think even regardless of what university or school or workplace you're in, I think we often meet the types of people that feature in the reunion. That kind of sense of entitlement and self-confidence, I think is kind of common to all locations. And
yes, that's why they're so authentic and believable, because you feel like you know someone, you know, just like Nick, or you know someone just like, you know, whoever, right? So yeah. All right, so what was the hardest, well, no, what was the most challenging thing about writing the reunion, and what was the most rewarding?
Ooh, good question. What was the most challenging thing? I think possibly the most challenging thing was, although we were in lockdown in Perth, it it was
no one's sympathizing with you, you know.
No, they will shortly. I think it was quite a hard experience. My father died during the writing of the reunion. He had COVID in the UK, and I wasn't able to leave Australia to get to him. So that was quite a challenging period. But in that sort of strange way that sometimes challenges sort of reap the biggest rewards, I think in some ways it began to mean even more to me as a book to finish, because my dad had been so proud that I went to Cambridge, and it had been a sort of a real high point of his life. He really believed very strongly in education. And yeah, so he was just so thrilled with me having the chance to go to Cambridge. So writing about Cambridge in the end, and also he knew how much I wanted to be a writer, how much I'd wanted to be a novelist. So even though he didn't see it on the shelves, I sort of feel like the book is kind of seeped with things that I mean, aside from the sort of scandalous drinking and sort of consent issues, I feel like the backdrop is something that he really would have appreciated. And so it was a really nice feeling to have that reward of finishing it.
I have no doubt this is just going to be so ridiculously successful. Like I said, it sucks you in from the first page. For let's finish with, for aspiring writers who would like to be published like you are one day, what are your top 3 tips to them?
I think the first one is probably a bit of a cliche. I know that a lot of people say it, but it's definitely true, and that is resilience, perseverance, and learning to deal with rejection. I'm counting all that as one. I know that is sort of 3 subsections, but I think even when you do get your first publishing deal, or you sign an agent, all of these amazing, exciting experiences that we're all sort of completely desperate to have, and very lucky to achieve, there will be rejection along the way. And I think a wise writer friend of mine once said that the only thing that really separates successful writers from non-successful writers is that sense of perseverance. So that's point 1. Tip 2, I think, is the competition element. Entering competitions will definitely hone your skills, and often they are the kind of thing that will offer you feedback, so you'll know where you're going with something. They are generally short extracts that they want. So if you're finding it a struggle to fit writing full time into your day-to-day life, just having to produce that short excerpt can really be something that kind of kicks you into gear and gets you started. Third and final tip, something profound, I guess: surround yourself by positive writer friends. That's something I've been really fortunate to make on my journey into writing. I've made some really amazing supportive writing friends, and when those dark days come, when you feel like you're writing into an abyss and nobody's going to read what you're doing, having those friends who've experienced it will help as well.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Again, congratulations on the reunion. This is so good, and honestly can't wait to see what you do next. So thank you so much for your time today, Polly.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy.